Welcome back to the deep dive. You know, we all want to get smart, fast, right? Cut through the fluff and really get to grips with a topic.
Exactly. No time to waste wading through mountains of text.
So today, using these Wikipedia excerpts you shared, which are surprisingly detailed, actually, we're diving into someone really fascinating, Antonio Salieri.
Yes, Salieri. Born 1750, Legnago, which was Venetian Republic back then. But he really made his mark in Vienna, didn't he? Right at the heart of the Habsburg Empire.
He sure did. And I think a lot of people have this, well, this image of him, maybe from that famous movie. That isn't quite the full picture.
Not even close, really. There's so much more to him.
So that's our mission today. Use these sources to unpack the real Salieri, his massive role in opera, some of his students, wow. And yeah, we got to talk about the Mozart stuff.
Right, the rivalry, the poisoning rumors.
Yeah.
Which, spoiler alert, have been pretty thoroughly debunked.
Exactly. Plus, why people are starting to listen to his music again now. So ready to jump in?
Absolutely. Let's start at the beginning. Born August 18th, 1750. And music was there from the get-go, it seems.
Yeah, his brother Francesco taught him first, and Francesco had studied with Tartini, the violinist.
That's the one. And also Giuseppe Simoni, who was a pupil of Padre Martini. So a solid grounding early on.
And he sounds like quite a character as a kid, like sugar, books, music.
Yeah.
Fair enough. But running away to hear violin concertos? Twice.
Uh-huh. And telling off a priest for playing the organ, too, theatrically.
Yeah. That shows some early conviction, doesn't it? Pretty strong opinions for a kid.
It really does. A hint of the serious artist to come, maybe. But, his childhood took a really tough turn.
Right. He was orphaned quite young, lost both parents between 63 and 64.
Yeah, devastating. He was looked after by a monk for a bit in Padua, then became the ward of this Venetian nobleman, Giovanni Mocenigo.
Mocenigo. Friend of the father, maybe, or a business connection?
The sources aren't totally clear, but yes, something like that. It was a lifeline, though.
Definitely. And that's when his formal music education really kicked up a notch in Venice.
Exactly. Studied with Pisetti, then Ferdinando Piccini, and it was Piccini who introduced him to the guy who changed everything, Florian Leopold Gassman.
Ah, Gassman. Tell us about him. He seems pivotal.
Absolutely pivotal. Gassman saw this immense talent in Salieri, knew he was an orphan, and just took him under his wing, brought him to Vienna in 1766.
And paid for his education.
Personally funded it, oversaw it, an incredible act of mentorship. One of the first things he did was take Salieri to the Italian church in Vienna, kind of setting the tone,
Wow.
Yeah.
So Gassman wasn't just a teacher, he was almost like a father figure.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Salieri lived with him until Gassman died, and Salieri got married in 75. Shows how close they were.
And the education Gassman arranged was intense, wasn't it? Not just music.
Oh, yeah. Latin, Italian poetry, German, literature, vocal composition, thorough bass. The works.
Grounded in Fuchs's Gradus ad Parnassum. What's the significance of that book? Sounds important.
Oh, it's a book on counterpoint. Basically how you write multiple melodies that work together. It was the foundation for composers for, generations. Salieri even translated parts of it. He really dug into it.
So he's soaking all this up?
Yeah.
And starts composing his own stuff?
Yep. There's a Mass in C major from 1767 that survives, and an early opera, La Vestale, from 69, but that one's lost, sadly.
Shame. Would love to hear that.
Me too. But Gassman also opened doors. Introduced him to Emperor Joseph II.
Wow.
And, crucially, to Christoph Willibald Gluck.
The Gluck, the opera reformer.
The very same. Salieri also got some informal coaching from the famous librettist Metastasio on setting words to music, and Gluck became a friend, an advisor, huge influences.
So all this leads to his first opera, Le Don Letterat, in 1770.
Based on Molière. Libretto by Giovanni Boccherini, brother of the composer Luigi Boccherini, actually.
And it was, okay, a modest success, the notes say.
Yeah, not a blockbuster, but good enough. It got him more work, which is what matters when you're starting out.
Right, like L'Amore Innocente and Don Chisciotte alle nozze di Gamache the same year.
Both with Boccherini librettos again. And you can already see him kind of mixing things up, playing with different styles.
Yeah, the Don Quixote one mixed ballet and comic opera, and L'Amour Innocent showed off different kinds of soprano voices.
Exactly. He wasn't afraid to experiment, even early on. That seems to be a theme.
Then came Armida in 1771. That was a bigger deal, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. His first major success. It's a serious opera based on Tasso's epic poem. Lots of drama, love, magic.
And influenced by Gluck's ideas about opera reform. More dramatic truth, less just showing off.
Precisely. You can really hear Gluck's influence there. And Armida got performed all over, especially in northern Germany. really boosted his reputation.
Okay, so he's established in serious opera, but then comes a comic opera hit, La Fiera di Venezia, 1772.
His first real popular smash. And this one sounds really cool, actually.
Characters singing in Italian, German, and French.
Yep. And these ensemble scenes that were apparently quite groundbreaking. The notes even say Mozart might have picked up a few tricks from it for Don Giovanni.
Whoa, okay. That's significant.
It really is. It also had these showy areas for a middle-class character, lots of coloratura, and prominent woodwind solos. Pretty unusual for comic opera back then.
So he's innovating in both serious and comic opera. What about his other stuff from this time, like La Secchia Rapita?
That was a parody. Apparently notable for using 3 timpani drums, which was pretty new, and La Locandiera, based on Goldoni. They were decent, maybe not quite as impactful as Armida or Fiera di Venezia.
And his instrumental music from this era, generally seen as less important than the operas.
That's a consensus, yeah. More in the standard galant style.
Yeah.
Elegant, pleasant, but maybe not breaking new ground like his operas were.
Gotcha. But his career is definitely on the upswing. In 1774, he takes over from Gassman.
As assistant director of the Italian opera, yeah. His mentor passes away, and Salieri steps into that role. Then he gets married the next year, 1775, to Therese Helferskorfer, settling down in Vienna.
So things are looking good, but the notes say the period right after Gassman's death didn't see any huge opera hits for him?
Seems that way. He was busy, for sure, composing, rehearsing, teaching. He wrote a symphony in D major around then, 1776, and an oratorio, La Passione di Gesù Cristo.
But no big opera successes. Any idea why? Maybe harder without Gassman's direct backing.
Could be. Navigating the politics of the opera world is always tricky. Plus, maybe just finding the right projects. And then things got really shaken up in 1777.
Ah, the Italian opera company folded. Financial problem.
Yep. And Emperor Joseph II decided to replace it with a German Singspiel company instead.
Which wasn't great for Salieri, right? Since Italian opera was his main thing.
Exactly. His German wasn't fluent yet, and the whole focus shifted. Fewer opportunities for him.
A setback. But then, an opportunity comes knocking from Italy. La Scala in Milan.
Right. Gluck was asked first to write the opening opera for the new theater, La Scala, but he turned it down. So with Gluck's blessing and the emperor's support, the gig went to Salieri in 1778.
Wow, opening La Scala, that's huge.
Massive. It led to this big Italian tour for him from 1778 to 1780. Really important trip.
So he premieres Europa Riconosciuta for the La Scala opening and writes some other operas while he's in Italy.
Yeah, 3 new comic operas. One of them, La Scuola dei Gelosi, The School for Jealousy, became a really big international hit for him.
So the Italian trip was a success. He comes back to Vienna in 1780, right when they're trying out that German Singspiel thing.
And he actually wrote one, Der Aufwärmkehrer, The Chimney Sweep, in 1781.
How did that go? The notes say it was one of the better ones from that experiment.
It had some success, yeah. But let's be honest, the only German opera from that specific push that really lasted is Mozart's Abduction from the Seraglio.
Fair point. But then, good news for Salieri, the Italian opera company gets revived in 1783.
It does. And Salieri's right in the thick of it, helping choose the singers. Big vote of confidence in him.
And then another opportunity comes via Gluck, this time in Paris.
Exactly. Gluck's getting older, has strong connections in Paris, and basically paves the way for Salieri to write for the Paris Opera. This leads to Les Danaïdes in 1784.
Ah, yes. The one with the slightly sneaky attribution, initially billed as Gluck's work, with Salieri helping.
Kind of, yeah. It was probably a smart move, using Gluck's famous name to guarantee a good reception in Paris, but the opera was a huge hit.
And then Gluck himself said, nope, this was all Salieri.
Pretty much. He made sure Salieri got the full credit once it was clear it was a triumph, and Les Danaïdes was massive. Really influential, especially in France. Berlioz loved it. It cemented Salieri as a top guy in that Gluck-style reform opera.
So he's riding high. Back in Vienna, he starts working with Lorenzo da Ponte, the guy who wrote Mozart's best librettos.
He did. Their first try, Il Rico d'un Giorno, didn't really work out, though.
But his next collaboration with Giambattista Casti, La Grotta di Trofonio, was better.
Yes, that one did well. And then there's that interesting little piece in 1786. He actually worked with Mozart.
Prima la musica e poi le parole. First the music and then the words. For a court party.
Yeah, a sort of musical competition put on by the emperor. Mozart wrote his piece, The Impresario, and Salieri wrote Prima la musica. They were performed back to back.
What does that tell us about their relationship then, if they're collaborating, even in a small way?
Well, it shows they could operate in the same professional sphere, right?
Hmm.
Maybe not best buddies, but capable of working together for a court event.
Hmm.
Points to some level of professional coexistence, at least.
Okay. Then Salieri goes back to Paris, has a flop with Les Aurès,
Yeah, that one didn't land.
but follows it up with a massive hit, Tarare, in 1787, with a libretto by Beaumarchais, the guy who wrote Figaro.
The very same.
Right.
And Tarare was a monster success, really seen as a high point of that whole reform opera movement. He also wrote a sacred cantata around then, Le Jugement Dernier, The Last Judgment.
And Tarare was so big, they translated it into Italian as Axur, Re Dormus, for a royal wedding in Vienna in 1788.
Exactly, which just shows its huge popularity. And 1788 was a banner year for Salieri for another reason, too.
Ah, the Kapellmeister appointment.
Yes,
Yeah.
Kapellmeister of the Imperial Chapel, one of the absolute top musical jobs in the entire empire. Basically, head of music for the court.
So 1788, Axur is his biggest international hit, and he gets the top job. He must have felt pretty invincible.
You'd think so. Axur was performed everywhere, but then things started to shift a bit. Emperor Joseph II died in 1790.
And he was Salieri's big supporter, right?
He was. And under the new emperor, Leopold II, and later Francis II, Salieri's influence, well, it wasn't quite the same. The political winds changed.
Did he keep composing operas?
Oh, yes. He wrote some interesting ones, actually. Kublai, Grand Kanzantardi, and Catalina are mentioned as being maybe a bit too innovative or politically tricky for the time.
And others like La Chifra, Palmyra, Regina di Persia, Falstaff. He wrote a Falstaff.
He did. Based on Shakespeare, years before Verdi, and Tessari in Pharmacusa. So he was still active. But then in 1804...
He quit the opera stage. Voluntarily. After a German opera, Deniger didn't do well.
That seems to be the story. He just decided, okay, that's enough opera for me. A major shift.
So after 1804, what's the focus?
Mainly two things. Sacred music and teaching, which, became incredibly important for his legacy.
So it sounds like a tough time personally, too. Lost his son in 1805, his wife in 1807.
Yeah, really hard personal blows. But he stayed active musically. He kept conducting...
Including premieres of Beethoven's works, his former student.
And he conducted that performance of Haydn's Creation where Haydn himself got overwhelmed and had to leave. Quite a moment.
Wow. And he kept composing other things, cantatas, teaching pieces.
Yep. And one big instrumental work later on, the variations on La Folia di Spagna for orchestra in 1815.
But the teaching, that's where his later influence really shines, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, look at the student list. Beethoven studied vocal composition with him. Liszt had lessons as a child, and Schubert.
Incredible. And the sources emphasize he gave free lessons to talented students who couldn't pay.
Just like Gassman had done for him. Paying it forward. It really says something about his character, doesn't it? His commitment to music and helping talent grow.
It really does. A generous spirit. But his final years were difficult.
Sadly, yes. He attempted suicide in 1823 and then suffered from dementia until he died on May 7th, 1825.
And they performed his own requiem at his memorial. A fitting end, in a way.
A very poignant one.
Okay, we can't wrap this up without tackling the elephant in the room. The relationship with Mozart.
Right. The drama, the
The
rumors.
sources mention letters from Mozart, and especially his father Leopold, that are pretty critical of Salieri, suggesting he and the other Italians were blocking Mozart's career.
Yeah, Mozart's definitely felt that way sometimes. Leopold particularly was often writing about Salieri and his cabal supposedly working against Wolfgang. You sense their frustration, feeling like outsiders trying to break into this Italian-dominated scene in Vienna.
So there was definitely some suspicion, some resentment there, at least from the Mozart side.
Seems so.
Yeah.
It reflects how competitive things were, and maybe Leopold being a bit of a protective stage dad.
And that feeds into the big one. The rumor that Salieri poisoned Mozart, it hung around for ages, didn't it?
Oh, for far too long. It got tied up with this idea of a big feud between the German and Italian musical styles. Apparently, Carl Maria von Weber, a major German composer later on, wouldn't even meet Salieri because he believed the rumors.
Wow. Where did the poisoning idea even come from?
It's murky, but it seems to have surfaced not long after Mozart died young. Maybe it tapped into those existing rivalries or just the shock of Mozart's death, but honestly, there's just no credible evidence for it.
Right. The medical details of Mozart's illness just don't match poisoning according to modern analysis.
Exactly. And conversely, there's actually quite a bit of evidence suggesting, well, maybe not friendship, but certainly professional respect.
Like Salieri bringing back Mozart's Figaro when he became Kapellmeister.
Yep. And going to hear Mozart's masses. And we mentioned that joint cantata they wrote per la recuperata salute di Ophelia.
And didn't Salieri help get some of Mozart's instrumental pieces performed?
Evidence suggests he did facilitate some premieres, yes.
Plus, that letter from Mozart right near the end of his life where he talks about taking Salieri to see the magic flute and Salieri being really enthusiastic.
Yeah, Mozart sounds genuinely pleased by Salieri's positive reaction in that letter. It doesn't sound like someone describing their mortal enemy.
Not at all. And after Mozart died, Salieri helped with his son's musical education, Franz Xaver.
He did. Took
Yep.
him on as a student for a while. Again, not really the action of a bitter rival who supposedly hated the father.
So, putting it all together, the poisoning story is basically fiction.
Overwhelmingly discredited by serious historians, yes. There might have been professional jealousy, maybe some friction, like in any field. But the murder plot, pure fabrication, likely fueled by later romantic notions and, of course,
Amadeus.
Amadeus.
Yeah.
The play from 1979, the film from 1984, hugely successful, brought Salieri's name back, but in a very specific, very fictionalized way.
It's a brilliant piece of drama, but the sources are clear. It's not history.
Not even remotely. It paints Salieri as this mediocre, scheming, gerund guy who destroyed Mozart, which is just wrong. He was hugely successful and respected in his own right.
So Amadeus is a double-edged sword, made him famous again, but for all the wrong reasons.
Pretty much. It created this incredibly powerful but false image in the public mind. Thankfully, since then, there's been a real effort to look at the actual Salieri.
More performances of his music.
Recordings.
Definitely more academic study, even opera festivals dedicated to him, like in his hometown, Legnago. People are finally starting to hear his music and judge it on its own merits. And his music pops up in weird places, too, like movies. The Last Castle, Iron Man.
Yeah. It shows his work has a certain power that still resonates.
So, summing up Salieri, it's complicated. Hugely successful, influential composer and teacher in his day.
Absolutely. Dominated the Viennese scene for decades.
And kind of forgotten, overshadowed by Mozart, and then redefined by this massive, largely fictional rumor amplified by Amadeus.
But now, hopefully, undergoing a bit of a reassessment, a rediscovery.
So the key things to take away: major opera composer, super important teacher, and the whole Mozart rivalry poisoning thing. Mostly myth.
That's the gist of it. Which leaves us with a final thought, maybe.
Go on.
Which is think about how easily historical figures, especially artists, can get trapped by narratives, by stories told about them, whether true or, like in Salieri's case, largely false.
How perception gets shaped by culture, by movies, by plays.
Exactly. It makes you wonder who else from history we might only know through a distorted lens. Maybe the best way to understand Salieri now is just to listen to his music, see what he actually had to say.